Welcome everybody to another episode of Everything CPA and Private Equity. So excited that we share information with you. We help educate this industry on all these great opportunities that are coming on. And today we have a big thank you to Mike Williams. He came to the PE Summit and our dinner where we had over 80 people talking about what was going on at the PE Summit. And he delivered a short talk about the Bitcoin Legacy Fund, the fund that we've helped set up with Mike for high net worth individuals of CPA firms. And Mike shared a little bit at our dinner. And today we're going to go a little bit more in depth. So welcome, Mike. And Phil, I know you've been very, very involved in this. You even got the souvenir t-shirt there. And so why don't you introduce Mike and let's get this rolling.
Yeah, so, Mike's been a friend for quite some time now. I want to say we probably met about 4 years ago, and together we were going to market, trying to help him find CPA firms that he could take, the wonderful TrueVestments platform and bring, wealth management to firms that either had done it very poorly or had not done it at all. We were fortunate to work with Mike and, bring a firm in Chicago across the finish line. And, things always come full circle. We were in Chicago last week for the Private Equity Summit. And just as in the prior year, we had Mike as a guest, and we're going to have Mike as a standing guest in Chicago since his office is there. But last year, he gave an amazing chat about demogranomics. And I'd say if you want to find out more what that is, book a call with Mike or go on their website. They've got some tremendous videos regarding that. This year, Mike spoke about Bitcoin and the amazing opportunity that's available for everyone. I was excited when Mike came to me and invited me to TrueVestments' first Bitcoin Summit. So I flew out to Sarasota, spent some great time with him and a bunch of other wealth management partners of Mike's. And wow, I thought I was not like a early bird. I started buying Bitcoin at 28,000. I'm not going to tell you where Mike started. I'm going to leave that for him. But David, I was so pleased to have Mike as a guest on our show. Mike, welcome.
Thanks, guys. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you, and I'm honored to be a part of the Whitman Advisory podcast platform.
Well, again, yes, welcome, and looking forward to you doing some amazing sharing because, Mike, when I think about when you and I first started chatting about this going back, well, it took a long time to get the pieces in place and regulatory approval and a private placement memorandum. But, there were times where we were talking and, Bitcoin was 115, 120. We saw it peak at like 126. And I sat back and I said, now we're at about 86, which is a great reset. And in my mind, many of the CPAs that we talk with are probably like, thinking, oh, I'm glad I didn't do this. And I want you to address, sort of, the thinking, why that's wrong. We talk about the 3 zeros.
Yep.
We talk about greed factor, but please, I'm going to zip it now because you're the expert.
Sure. I think you brought up excellent points. The problem I think that people have with Bitcoin is they immediately think of the price and where it might go. And they think that's the limit of what Bitcoin represents. And since they generally, usually if they're worried about the price or, hey, is this a good day to do this? They're not thinking about it correctly. I will share, Phil, having watched Bitcoin and owned it since $700 a token, I can tell you emphatically that it is a normal occurrence to watch price move rather dramatically. You might be wondering, why is it doing that? Well, sometimes, and you properly mentioned the 3 zeros, I think what happens is people hear something that costs $126,000, suddenly it drops to 50, and they think, oh my God, it's broken. Well, it's done that many times percentage-wise. In other words, it dropped from 1,000 to 500 in a heartbeat. but that was a long, long time ago. It dropped from 10,000 to 5,000 almost in a heartbeat, but that was a long, long time ago. And here's what the pathway is going to look like in the future. It's going to, quote, vault to, I don't know, pick a number, 180 grand. And then it's going to crash to 120. And then it's going to go to a 275 and it's going to crash to 197. And then it's going to go to 371 and it's going to crash to 250. In other words, it's going to do this for a very, very, very long time. Why? Well, in the investment world, the larger a value in the future that's being discounted to today, the more volatile the ride. In other words, if something was going to go from $100 to $200 over a, I don't know, 5-10 year period, it would put you to sleep. In other words, it would just kind of barely move. There's nothing driving capital flow, capital exit, capital concern, capital confidence. There's nothing driving it if the opportunity is $100 gain. But if it's a $10 million gain, all sorts of questions come in. That's crazy. You've got to be kidding me. You're a complete nut. This is a fraud. It's a Ponzi scheme. That's crazy. By the way, those same stories have been discussed repeatedly the entire way up. I mean, the entire way up. And it wasn't too long ago that Bitcoin reached $100,000 for the very first time. But here's what I would remind you. If I said to you somewhere along the way of all the experience you have now had with, say, an Apple or a Google or an NVIDIA or a Broadcom or a Micron or a Taiwan Semiconductor or an Amazon or a Netflix, if I said to you, hey, X just saw their stock drop from $125 to $80, would you run and never buy it again? Would you
No way.
would you say, oh God, that's clearly a fraud? I mean, that's obviously a Ponzi scheme because look what it did, guys. It went from 126 to $50. Clearly that's a fraud, right? I mean, the business model must be completely broken, and I have no idea who would ever want an iPhone after all.
Well, the smart ones, when that happens, would go out and buy more.
That's my point. In other words, if you judge the size of the event that's unfolding based on current emotional day-to-day price change, you will never participate in large events. It never will happen because there is no large event that unfolds without tremendous volatility. And the event that's unfolding is really what they should focus on. In other words, when someone says to me, "Hey, Mike, it's volatile. Is today a good day to buy Bitcoin?" Well, I express to them, you might want to consider turning that question a little bit on its head. You might want to consider, is today a good day for my wealth, my dollars, to stop going down in value? And when you stop the brain from thinking in terms of current mindset, of mainstream thinking, which, by the way, never captures large events. Mainstream thinking thinks far too short term and far too right in front of your nose and what's right ahead at the next stop sign. It is impossible in that perspective to see a larger picture unfolding. You are unable to do so, and your brain does not permit you to see if you're only focusing on the next event. So why is that important? It's important because you want to say to yourself, why did Larry Fink spend, I don't know, 5 or 10 years saying, nah, that's not for us? And then he became the largest or second largest owner of Bitcoin. Why did they go from nothing to the most profitable revenue asset they have in 15 months? Why did that happen? Why did probably the most outspoken financial person in the world when it comes to Bitcoin, Why did Jamie Dimon, the head of JP Morgan, spend a decade telling you it was a fraud and then stand in front of princes from Saudi Arabia and tell them that's an asset he supports and he was wrong on and he'll lend you money on it?
And he wants as much of your Bitcoin as he can get to lend on it.
He wants as much of that collateral as you'll give him. Furthermore, why would that same guy, literally weeks later, and this was just a few weeks ago, add Ethereum to that collateral list? Why would, if these were really Ponzi schemes, why in the world would the largest bank and the largest asset manager be making such aggressive inroads when Wall Street is plastering on every billboard you want to listen to mentally that they're going to retokenize the entire financial system? Why would you think this doesn't mean anything? Why would
And
you?
along those lines, Mike, anyone can look up the facts, but I think I heard something like less than 5 or 6% of the people on our planet own any Bitcoin.
Oh, that's correct. You are. Well, let's put some stats to it. There's only 21 million Bitcoin. 20 million of it is mined and owned. I'm rounding it off a little bit. I think we have a tad bit under 20 million. But here's the point. 95% of the world owns none of it. That is going to disperse. And quite honestly, the volatility you're watching is some of that disbursement. Think of IPO process. You may have read on this. By the way, Google Bitcoin IPO, and you're going to see a report come up that I'm going to give you some highlights from. Let's pretend the three of us were very fortunate, and many, many, many years ago, we invested in this crazy little idea that some kid that dropped out of college came to us on. It was called, what was it? Microsoft. It was this thing that he was trying to describe to us. It was software. Now, God knows what that meant at the time, but it was called software. And he described this thing that businesses would be able to use it and grow and do things they've never imagined being able to do. And all you needed to do was be part of the, I don't know, $100 million that he got from private equity guys way back when nobody even knew how to spell software. Nobody knew that the personal computer was coming. Nobody understood any of this. There was no big internet bubble in the future. There was no tech bubble in 2000. Nobody even knew what that could possibly mean. But some people thought, hey, if this thing catches on, it's going to be worth a fortune. So let's pretend the three of us said, hey, let's put in a couple of $1 million. Let's just see what happens with this kid. And then later on, of course, we know a little bit more now about what happened to Microsoft, and it created, centibillionaires. And what we did is we got lucky. Our couple million when it went public was worth 1,000 times what we spent for it. So what would we do as the original IPO guys, the guys that got Microsoft for a penny a share? I mean, what would we do when it was worth hundreds of billions?
Probably be on a 80-foot yacht, and I probably wouldn't be podcasting with David.
But what we would do as PE guys is we would sell some of it and take that huge hoard of money and go find the next Microsoft. Right? We would like consolidate some of our assets. Well, now think about this. There are people who waited more than a decade and a half for their 3-cent Bitcoin to be worth 100 grand. And to them, that was an IPO moment. To them, it was, oh my God, I bought this thing for 3 cents and it's worth 100 grand. I'm a multi-billionaire from something I spent $3,000 on. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sell part of it and I'm going to go do something with that money. Well, what happens when that takes place? In that IPO moment, that one guy sells to 3,000 other guys. In other words, it disperses and it spreads that dollar around and it spreads that Bitcoin so that one guy can't nuke the market. In other words, One guy is finding a way out so that there is liquidity to spread that asset. Okay. Because if one guy used to, if that one guy wanted to sell his Bitcoin when it was 10,000 bucks, he couldn't. He would crater the market. When it was 50,000 bucks, he couldn't. It would crater the market. When it was 100,000 bucks and people were starting to talk about it and Wall Street was involved and there were ETF buyers and there's institutions adding it to their pension fund, guess what? He gets his IPO moment. He gets his ability to spread that capital. And what does it do? It brings in a new level of what we call zero. In other words, there's a whole group of people now that own Bitcoin at $100,000. Their IPO moment is 10 million, just like the guy who bought for a nickel was 100 grand.
Yes.
So what's that doing? That's actually making it healthier.
So, Mike,
yeah.
are you telling me that with Bitcoin, and we'll stick with Bitcoin,
Sure.
that there is still an opportunity for the neighbor next door, the individual that thinks I can't touch this, it's 86,000, to have one of those IPO moments? David, you had a question?
Yeah. And talking about the neighbor next door, right? Because we're here to talk about not only Bitcoin, we're here to talk about the Bitcoin legacy fund.
Sure.
Right. So we know the vast majority of folks haven't participated yet and aren't, right?
Yes.
So if I'm a CPA, how does the Bitcoin legacy fund help me, my clients, capture the next IPO moment? So why don't you connect it to also the fund a little bit?
Absolutely. Well, in my wealth management career, which started in 1982 when the Dow was 900, what I can tell you emphatically is the mistakes that people made in the stock market, traditional finance, if you will, the mistakes they made over those 43 years are going to be repeated in the digital world, and they're driven by emotions. In other words, we are all human, and the weakness we have in our investing plan is between our ears. It's not in the market. It's not in the advisory world. It's not some scam artist. It's not a guy out there that's after us. It's the guy that visits us every morning while we're shaving and we look in the mirror. That's the guy that's the dangerous part of our investment plan. And I only know this because I've watched every Armageddon possible in the 43 years I've watched the market go from 900 to 48,000. And in fact, we are right this minute, in case no one connects the dots, we're living through another monster. And the monster for traditional finance on Wall Street is that AI, which some people still don't know how to spell and has barely gotten started, is already a bubble and it's already dead. So according to the press, AI is a bubble. It's not going to cause anyone to be able to create opportunity from, and all stocks are overpriced because of it. It might be one of the most absurd storylines I can recall, and I've been through a lot of them. I've watched them all. And you know what happens? There's no Armageddon. There is no apocalypse. The world of Wall Street has taught people to think in terms of scarcity instead of abundance. There is an endless opportunity ahead of us. Endless. Anyone who's willing to get out of the noise between their ears and study what's actually going on can and will participate in wealth beyond their current ability to imagine. For me to say to you today, yeah, there's a $10 million pathway, there's a $20 million pathway. There are pathways even larger than that the longer you move into the new financial system that Wall Street and the banking system will build. It will get built. The question is this. You say to yourself, Mike, that is the nuttiest thing I have ever heard. Well, imagine if we were in 1982 and I said to you, yeah, the Dow will hit 50,000 in the next 35, 40 years. Imagine how crazy that would have sounded. Nobody had even seen 1,000. They had never even dreamed of 2,000. If you told them it'd be 40s and 50s, would they have thought you were a nut? Of course they would have thought you were a nut. When I bought Bitcoin, if you said to me, Mike, in 15 years it'll be 100,000, it was a dream. It was a fantasy. Nobody knew where it was going. but we understood that it meant something important if we just watched the pathway unfold. So, how does the fund allow someone to do that? It takes you out of your emotional mindset. It vaults away in cold storage, offline, completely secure and insured, your own generational changing pathway. Anyone with wealth knows this fact. The dollar and currency, paper currency that can be printed at will and will continue to be printed at will is why we don't hold dollars. Why do people buy real estate, stocks, and bonds and businesses with dollars? Well, they buy them because those assets grow faster than inflation and dollars die because of inflation. The purchasing power deteriorates. It has proven that forever in its existence. Whereas the other asset classes have proven the opposite. Why? Because the thing that buys them keeps going down in value. The one thing that makes Bitcoin, well, there's many things, but one of the primary things that makes Bitcoin a better silo to capture that future wealth is there's only 21 million. That's it. And when all those young guys, now old guys, who bought it a nickel, when they're all done liquidating and they've all passed it off, when that IPO process has been burned through, millions more people will own it. It will become less volatile and more liquid, and its price will continue on its uptrend. Why? Because once it's dispersed, the only way to get one is to buy someone else's. You cannot just go print another Bitcoin. You can't get Microsoft to sell another 6 million shares. You can't get another IPO. It is a fixed asset and the only one of its kind ever built. Imagine for a second, if you're trying to get it in your mind, imagine for a minute, you know real estate very, very well. Imagine for a second that there was some force that an announcement came across the government airwaves tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and they said, "We have chosen the 21 million pieces of real estate that will not be burned to the ground in the next 30 days. You will never be able to build another piece of real estate. No city or government will give you a permit to do so. There's only these 21 million pieces of real estate. That's it." How fast do you think those pieces of real estate would rise in value? How quickly would money rush to go find a way to secure wealth? The only reason it would happen faster is because they have some experience with real estate. They know that it goes up in value over time. They know it creates income. They know what it does. They don't understand what Bitcoin does.
So,
Because
Mike,
yes,
yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. With that being said, David's my CPA.
yes,
I'm a high net worth client.
yes,
Okay. How might David, as a partner in a CPA firm,
yes,
bring someone like me that, I might be a conservative guy, but
yep.
I've got millions to spread around?
Yes, excellent question. What we built this together for was to partner with CPAs and help them provide the educational insight for their clients. We can do that via video. We can do that via joint discussion. They can be in every one if they want. We can do that via a private webinar. We can put on a summit for their clients in their main offices. Our goal is to make sure as many people as possible through their CPA partners, their best clients need this education. They need to know the facts. It needs to be a process by which they can rely that something is going to be taught to their client. They can participate. Dave can participate every step of the way. He can make sure he's got a second set of eyes. He can listen to what's being said. He can participate in the conversation. And eventually, what will happen is their clients will be able to make a decision on their participation with proper insight. That's the key. If you're going to make a decision, then make sure this important decision is made with the right insight, the right education, and the right materials. And we'll share that through Dave with his clients in group or singular setting, however he prefers.
Now, Mike, in the few minutes we have before we wrap up,
Sure.
why don't you also talk about the Bitcoin documentary
Yes.
and the premiere viewing, what actually occurred, and why this is a great opportunity for those CPA firms as well.
Absolutely. Upon request, I can provide a branded private viewing page for their clientele. It's a 90-minute documentary we built to help people understand every important aspect of Bitcoin, what it does, why the financial system will demand its use, why we must have it given the expansion that is coming into our economy, which again, most people are just not aware of because they're not paying attention to the right things. There's a reason we're setting records. There's a reason we're getting 4% GDP growth on a $30 trillion GDP base. There's a reason that acceleration is happening. They must be aware of it. There's a reason robotics are demanded. There's a reason autonomous needs are coming. We cover all of that in the documentary so that they can privately understand exactly what's going on. We've got that in virtual format. We did have our premiere here in Sarasota just a few weeks ago. The theater was obviously packed. When the movie ended, we opened it up for Q&A. Not a single person left the seats. By the way, these were complete strangers. They didn't know us from Adam. They weren't clients that we paid to sit there. They were complete strangers that came from the general public. Not a person moved except to go to the bathroom, and they came back to their seat after the movie had been completed. Q&A session started. I thought it would go for a few minutes. It went for an hour and 5 minutes after the movie. They had already been in the theater for 2 hours. They stayed another hour. We were forced to stop taking questions because the theater had to start their next movie. It is rest assured, if the CPA senior partners will take this seriously, here's what they're going to find. Their client really wants to understand what this is. Their wealthy client needs to understand what this is, and they must make it a part of their wealth process.
That is awesome. And if you recall, when David opened up, he said, we're here to educate CPAs. This is all about education. So that's great. David, I don't know if you want to wrap us up, maybe give Mike an opportunity to, if there's, one last piece of wisdom he has for folks, or please,
I
David,
think instead of wisdom with Bitcoin, why don't you talk to the managing partners of the CPA firm and how can they get involved in this, right?
Yes.
It's about giving wisdom to their clients, but how can the CPA firm get involved and engage with the Bitcoin legacy firm?
I think what they've got to do is obviously they can write me an email if they wanted. That's mike@truevestments.com. That's true without the E, TRUVESTMENTS.com. The easier way is probably just respond to the podcast. When Phil and Dave post this podcast, respond to it, make a comment. We will follow up for you. We will answer any questions. And again, don't let the noise make you nervous. It has been that way from the start. It will only go higher over time. And the stress of the noise will become larger for all the reasons we touched on earlier. The volatility will stay. It will become a part of it for a lot of people. They will understand why, because the mountain to climb, if you will, is so large. If it was a small mountain, there would be no volatility. That's the way money works. That's the way all investing works. It's never been any different. The word Bitcoin and the word crypto probably adds this angst to it that is unnecessary. Think of it like any other asset. It will grow and expand over time. And the larger it's going to be, the more volatile the trip to the final destination.
Well, on behalf of Phil and Mike Williams, big thank you. Bitcoin is something very exciting, very scary for some.
Yes,
But I think and CPA is very scary for some. I think you
that's right.
educate yourself, you get to know the facts so that you can make a great decision. But this is a way for firms to help their clients and also help the firms themselves as well. So
And
big thank
David,
you to Mike, Phil.
before you sign us off, the one thing I want to say is if I were a CPA firm, managing partner or a partner in a CPA firm, I wouldn't want a client coming to me 10 years from now saying, my good friend Joe Blow, his CPA suggested he get into Bitcoin. How come you never suggested me to take that path as well and miss out on an opportunity? Just my thoughts.
Yeah. Good point, Phil. I would add, you don't want your competition explaining this to clients. That's not what you want.
Like everything we do, education first, right? I think
First,
as a leader, you need
absolutely.
to get this education so that you're
Absolutely.
comfortable making the decisions.
100% correct.
And Mike has built really an education first platform and then execution after that. So any questions, feel free to reach out directly to Mike or to Phil, right? And they will help educate you so that you can make the best decision for your clients, for your firm, for yourself. So big thank you to Mike. And for all our audience, again, we're here to educate. We're here to help. These are complicated issues, and education from experts is really a core part of Whitman Advisory. And go crush your day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into Everything CPA and Private Equity. Every episode brings fresh insight. However, there's always more to talk about. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe wherever you watch podcasts. Have a question or topic you'd like us to cover? We'd love for you to reach out to us. Together, we will help you navigate this dynamic landscape so that we can help you achieve your goals. Until next time, keep making moves that matter. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.